What's up guys, this is Zach with Top Deck Nation coming at you today with another deck profile from the brand new set Guardians Rising. Now if you haven't checked out our last video, be sure to do that. We covered the full English set as well as some cards that didn't quite make the cut, and those are mainly going to be cards from SM2 Plus, which is basically like an expansion pack, as well as some of the Sun and Moon 3 cards, which we won't be seeing until August. We've also done a lot of coverage on some deck profiles as well, such as Sylveon GX and Alola Ninetales GX, so be sure to check those out. We'll have more for you in the near future, but today we're going to be looking at a brand new deck, and that is going to be Sableye, Decidueye, Vileplume. Now the deck has seen some hype ever since the release in Japan with Sun and Moon 2, but I haven't actually seen an official deck list anywhere, so I'm not sure if it's actually been played at tournaments, depending on how the format was in Japan, but I thought I would just kind of go over my take on the deck. Now as you can see, it's kind of a standard kind of Decidueye deck. I'd say a good 55 cards or so are your bare bones Decidueye Vileplume deck, but the addition of Sableye and cards like Tapu Lele and things like that, I think are going to make a pretty big impact in the deck. It's hard to say if this will be the norm, like the standard way to be playing the deck from now on, but I do think it's an interesting take on the deck, and I do want to just kind of go over that today. Now the strategy of the deck is going to be pretty simple here. We're going to try to make sure that Sableyes are active, and we want to have Decidueye and Vileplume out. So what that means is Sableye's first attack here for 1 dark energy, which we can use rainbow energy to count that. It says your opponent cannot play supporter cards, and that's going to be really just devastating because that means your opponent can't play things like Professor Sycamore or N or Lysander or anything like that, Hex Maniac to shut off Decidueye or Vileplume. So they're basically going to be stuck there supporter locked, but then you also have Vileplume to item lock your opponent as well, so they can't play things like Ultra Ball, Trainer's Mail, Verseeker, etc. So, the bulk of their trainer cards are pretty much going to be locked in. They can play stadiums, but that's pretty much it. So, I would say 30 to 35 cards of their deck are pretty much going to be rendered useless. And Decidueye just kind of adds to that because as you can see, Sableye doesn't really do any damage. So, yeah, the lock is nice, but if you can't take any prizes, you're not really going to go far in the game. Decidueye's Feather Arrow ability lets you put 20 damage anywhere, and if you have 4 of these guys out, or just say 3, we'll probably have no more than 3 out, I would say. That's going to be allowing you to place 60 damage on the board every single turn of the game. So in a couple turns, that means you can knock out a Shaman. Maybe in 3 turns, you can knock out some kind of EX they're building up, like Eviltal EX or Volcanion EX or something like that on the bench. But as you can see, the possibilities here are just limitless because you're essentially locking your opponent in and you're just spreading damage around until you win the game. Now, as far as our Pokemon count goes, we have 25 Pokemon in here, a whopping 25. It's really a shame that something like Pokemon Communication isn't really in the format anymore. I think that let you put a Pokemon into the deck and then get another Pokemon out. That'd be really, really strong in this deck. Probably a replacement for Level Ball, I'm not really sure. But yeah, the Pokemon count here, we have a 4-4-4 Decidueye line. That's pretty standard because you want to make sure you draw into it. You want to make sure they're not prized, and I think it's a pretty ideal count, pretty standard count. We have a 2-2-2 Vileplume line, and this is to make sure that we get Vileplume out as soon as possible, preferably the first turn of the game. And the reason we're not playing like a 4-4-4 line is because you don't really need to. It's Decidueye, you play it because the ability is stacks, and so you want to have plenty of those abilities going every turn. But Vileplume, once you get 1 out, you're pretty much good. So, and the 2-2-2 line just kind of assures that you're not going to really prize them. We're also going to be playing 3 Shaman, and that's going to make sure that we draw through the deck, we're burning through cards. A typical Decidueye Vileplume deck, it can get set up turn 1, and that's really because Shaman is providing you basically extra supporter outs. Professor Sycamore and N are nice, but if you only can play a supporter and then pass, chances are you're not going to get that ideal hand. Shaman paired up with something like Ultra Ball is just insane because you can draw 6 cards, and just keep doing that until you burn through like half your deck and get set up on the very first turn. We're only going to be playing 2 Sableye here because we have some other things that we can attack with. We have Decidueye, Tapu Lele, Lugia, stuff like that, but I could definitely understand if you want to play a third one just because this deck is going to be more centric around the supporter luck. So I could definitely see 3 if you want to try starting with it, but I think 2 is a decent count, especially when Decidueye can use its GX attack to get it back. And then finally, we have Tapu Lele and Lugia. Now, this count right here is a little bit questionable because, originally I thought that you could just do 2 Tapu Lele and no Lugia, but the reason people are still wanting to play Lugia in this deck, even with Tapu Lele out, is because of the second attack here, Deep Hurricane. It does 80, and then if you have a stadium in play, or if there is a stadium in play in general, it does 70 more and you discard the stadium. So, it's a really good utility card. If you're stuck and your opponent has something like Perilous City out, or just some kind of stadium that's kind of benefiting them, you might want to play Lugia. And in addition, if you think about the math, Lugia makes a lot of sense here. Lugia can do 150 damage for 2 attachments, if you count as DCE as a single attachment. And then if you have 3 Decidueye out, that's going to be 60 more damage. So that's going to be doing 210, and that is enough to knock out any kind of Mega Pokemon like Mega Gardevoir and Mega Mewtwo that's played in the format right now. But on the flip side of that, you have to look at how good Tapu Lele is. Tapu Lele has an ability, it's like Stellar Guidance with Jirachi EX. It lets you search for any supporter and put it in your hand when you play it down. And that is an extremely powerful ability in this deck, because a lot of times you'll be item locked yourself, and maybe you'll have like a handful of really bad cards and you want an N, you want a Professor Sycamore to get rid of those cards. Tapu Lele is going to let you do that. Now, I wouldn't just play it down whenever you want. It's probably a bit more situational than Lugia. You want to wait until you're looking for a supporter in particular. And its attack is essentially Lugia's Arrow Ball, so really good. And finally, the GX attack for a single Psychic Energy. Now keep in mind, Rainbow Energy will work as Psychic. I can heal 2 of my bench Pokemon off completely. And that's going to be really strong as well if you think about it, because that means Tapu Lele can completely heal off something like Vileplume or Decidueye. I don't know how often you'll use the attack, but it's definitely handy just in case something's damaged and might get Lysandered up. As far as our supporters go, we have a pretty standard line here. We play 4 Professor Sycamore because it's probably the best draw support in the game. We play 3 in just because early game shuffling drawing 6 is great, but later game shuffling drawing 1 or 2 isn't so much. So that's why we're only playing 3 in versus 4. And then 2 Lysander kind of tops it off, because Lysander combined with Sableye, combined with Item Lock, is just extremely strong. And Sableye especially, if you think about it, you're forcing your opponent to play to have something like an Olympia in their hand. And, if you're supporter locked, it still doesn't even really matter. I mean, they're not going to be retreating, period, unless it's something with like a 1 or 2 retreat cost. But basically, this is how you kind of lock something in. If you have, if your opponent plays something like a Volcanion EX, for example, we can Lysander the Volcanion up, we can supporter an item lock, and then suddenly if your opponent can't draw into 3 fire energies, they're pretty much going to lose the game, because we're going to be spreading damage around and keeping that Volcanion active. So it can't do anything really. It's basically stuck there. As far as our stadiums go, of course, our go-to stadium is going to be Forest Giant Plants. It's going to let your grass Pokemon evolve right away, which basically means they don't have to wait. Normally the evolution rule is they have to sit there for a turn in order to evolve them. So you put down Rowlet turn 1, turn 2 it's Dartrix, and turn 3 it's Decidueye. And as you can see, that would be a really, really slow way to get this deck set up. So Forest Giant Plants lets us bypass that role. So on the first turn, we can put down Rowlet, Dartrix, and Decidueye, as well as Oddish Gloom and Vileplume. So you get set up really, really quick, and it's just the ideal stadium in this deck. As far as our items go, we play 4 Trainer's Mail, 4 Ultra Ball. That's going to make sure that we get everything set up. We draw into Forest Giant Plants or any other trainer card that we need. We play 3 Level Ball because, in addition to Rowlet and Dartrix and Oddish and Gloom, it's also searching out Sableye. So, the bulk of our Pokemon have 90 or less HP. So I think Level Ball is definitely warranted here, because it's going to let you just get these Pokemon in a pinch, put them down, and you're good to go. We're going to be playing 2 Floatstone because we need a way to retreat out just in case Vileplume or anything else gets stuck in the active position. For example, your opponent may just kind of Lysander at Vileplume, and then they just sit there until they're pretty much set up, and then they can start Lysandering up like Decidueye or Lugia, whatever they want to do. So, I would recommend at least 2 Floatstone here. If I had a couple more spots, I would definitely add a 3rd, but again, because we play Sableye, the consistency kind of drops a little bit. Tapu Lele makes up for it a bit, but again, that 3rd Floatstone would definitely make a difference. And finally, we have a copy of Revitalizer, and this is really good to get back our grass Pokemon. As you can see, there's a lot of ways we can get rid of cards in our hand. We have Ultra Ball, we have Professor Sycamore. So early game, if you look, we play like, it looks like we play 18 grass Pokemon. So chances are we're going to be discarding those in the first few turns. So Revitalizer, just in case we can't get the Vileplume or we're just kind of a card or 2 short away from it, Revitalizer is going to let us get some cards back and hopefully get set up here. And again, a lot of decks, it's pretty typical to play 2 Revitalizer. And again, this is really just kind of a space issue. I do wish I could fit in another Revitalizer. Like I said, if we took out the Sableye, that's 2 more spots. And I would say that would definitely be 3rd Floatstone and 2nd Revitalizer. And finally, we have 8 energy here. We're going to be playing 4 Rainbow and 4 DCE. Now, normally most of these builds, like Decidueye Vileplume, you're going to be playing 4 Grass, 4 DCE. But in this this case, Sableye does require a dark. It's not a colorless, unfortunately, so we have to play Rainbow Energy. And the downside to that is Sableye already has a really low HP. It's got 60 HP. The card developers probably thought that the attack is just extremely good, and if they made it like 100 HP, it would just be really broken. So, Rainbow Energy is going to make it at 50 HP versus 60, but that's okay. It's also going to make Tapu Lele pretty good because we can use that GX attack. And finally, keep in mind that it will work with Decidueye as well. And you can always use the GX attack with Decidueye to get back any 3 cards. So if something is knocked off with like Team Flare Grunt or Enhanced Hammer, for example, you can always get that card back. But that's pretty much going to be the list, guys. It's a pretty interesting deck list. The idea of the deck itself, supporter and item locking is extremely, extremely strong. In Expanded, I'm sure there's a way that you can already do this. I think there's an Executor that has an attack. I think it's called Blockade, and it basically does the same thing, but you got to keep in mind that Executor is a stage 1. And so a stage 1 is going to be a little bit harder to set up. It's going to have less space in the deck for other things. So I think Sableye will be an interesting inclusion in the deck. It's hard to say how competitive it's going to be because the low HP is going to be a big factor. People are starting to play more energy disruption cards like Team Flare Grunt, and the format is going to change, pretty dramatically, in my opinion, once Guardians Rising comes out. There's going to be a lot of decks that are going to be going after Decidueye, especially Sylveon decks. We did a deck profile, check it out in our channel, but Sylveon is going to be a pretty unfavorable matchup for Decidueye because it's constantly searching the deck for any card at once, knocking off energy, etc. And then even things like Turtonator just kind of make Volcanion even better to the point where, the matchup gets a lot better there as well. But if there's any changes that you guys would make, be sure to let me know in the comments. I'm definitely open to suggestions and ideas. And be sure to subscribe to our channel in the meantime, guys. You guys have been amazing. The support's been really great. Our subscriber count has just kind of shot through the roof with Guardians Rising. It's pretty insane. But I do thank you guys for that. And, that's what really motivates me to keep pushing out these videos. So I do appreciate that a lot. But in the meantime, this has been Zach with Top Deck Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.